Good afternoon. My name is Richard Taylor, author, speaker, journalist, among other things. But I'm here today again with my Tuesday testimony, a little bit of inspiration to tell about some of the things that I went through, what God has brought me from and delivered me from, and allowed me to be here today. So this incident I am going to talk about happened about 6 years ago. You just saw the photo of me surviving two brain aneurysms and a 5-hour brain surgery to be here today. Um, and just to tell you about that real quick, this happened about in February 2014, about 2 weeks before my 35th birthday. At this time, I was living in Virginia Beach. I was attending Tidewater Community College. I was also fully employed and working on my second book, which is subsequently been published, Wrongfully Accused, Rightfully Acquitted. However, uh, during this time, this incident started on a Friday. Friday, I was at work and I was at my desk, and I noticed the headache come on, and the headache was got progressively severe throughout the day's time. So me being who I am, not being worried, I got home, took a couple of Tylenol, went to sleep and thought that would be the end of the headache. But Saturday I got up, I still had the headache, and I was coughing a little bit. So I said, okay, maybe it's just a cold coming on. So from where I'm from, and I've heard from my youth, if you drink liquor, it'll knock a cold out. So of course I was drinking at the time. So I went to the liquor store, got me a bottle. I can't remember what it was, but I drank the bottle Saturday night. Thought that was going to be it, but again, the headache still remained Sunday morning when I woke up. So it kept getting worse and worse, and I had a roommate at the time who had just got his tooth pulled. So he had some Oxycontins or Vicodins or something, one of those strong pain medicines. So I asked him for a couple of those Sunday, popped them, and still got no relief from the headache. So uh, I went to work Monday. I went to work Monday. I was sitting at my desk, and I started coughing, and every time I coughed, like the pain in my head would just throb. So I was like, man, something is definitely wrong, man. You know, and I started begin to feel a little bit lightheaded throughout the day. When I would get up to go to the bathroom or walk around, I would notice like a uneasy feeling in my lower back, and it trickled down to like my right leg, where it was kind of hard to move and control. So I decided at that point, at work, I said, okay, after work, I'm going to go to the hospital. But once again, being a stubborn man, I said, no, I'm going to go to school first. I'm going to go to the university, to the college, and do a couple of things, work on my book, do a couple of assignments, and then after that, I'm going to go to the hospital. So I got to the school, which wasn't far from my workplace. I opened up my computer, started trying to work on some things. Actually, that next day I was supposed to speak at a student African Brotherhood meeting. And so I was getting my materials together for that. And I just couldn't focus. The pain was there. There was a little bit of lightheadedness. So I said, man, something's not right, man. I'm going to go over here and use the bathroom. And, after I use the bathroom, then I'm going to go to the hospital. So I went up there to use the bathroom. When I stood up, once again, it was an uneasy feeling in my back where I couldn't, really control my extremities. So, at this point in time, I was actually catching the bus. So I caught the bus from the school to my apartment, which was about a 30-minute ride. And I said, okay, matter of fact, I'm not even going to go to the hospital. I'm going to go up here and take a shower first. And then I'm going to wake my roommate up and tell him to take me to the hospital because his car was there. So when I got to the house, I didn't even make it up the steps. Before I could make it up the steps, I felt something like a pop in my head. And when I felt that pop, it was like, just instantly, it felt like my head was in a vice. It felt like somebody was, had two little metal pieces and was just squeezing my head inward. And I was like, I immediately started to be like, oh man, what is this? Oh Lord. And, it was a feeling that I never felt before. So I got up the stairs and woke my roommate up. I said, look, man, come on, man, something's wrong, man. You got to take me to the hospital, man. My head. And he got up kind of groggy. He was always like a slow mover. He was one of those smooth guys who, just takes his time with everything. I'm like, come on, man, hurry up, man. Something is wrong. So he was like, all right, man, let me use the bathroom first. And so I'm thinking he just had to urinate, but turns out that he had to defecate. So I'm thinking he's gonna come right out. So I just immediately hop in the passenger side of the car. I start, up and down, Lord, please. First thing I called on was God. I started pleading the blood of Jesus over my life and over my, over the situation. I just prayed and prayed and prayed. It was so uncomfortable that I never felt anything like that in my life. So I sat in the car for about 10 minutes, like, where's this guy at? And I come, I go back into the apartment, and I realize, okay, with that, he just coming out of the bathroom. So he's like, yeah, man, I had the dookie, man. All right, I got you. So we were in the town center section of Virginia Beach, and the nearest hospital was down on Independence Boulevard, which was about a 10-minute ride from the apartment. So we hop in the car. I'm steadily praying. I'm steadily pleading the blood of Jesus. He's looking at me like, man, are you all right, man? What's wrong? I was like, nah, man. Hurry up, man. For real, something is wrong. So we got to the hospital, and once again, this is just another aspect of the story that really lets me know that, I wasn't really supposed to be here. The hospital that we got to was actually under renovation, and they didn't have anything but a triage. They didn't have anything but a triage in their facility. And, so they took me in the triage and alerted me, to look, Mr. Taylor, we can't do anything here. We're going to have to, call Norfolk. And I was just, begging and pleading them, telling them what's wrong. And it was like, we can kind of stabilize you, but, we're going to have to call Norfolk Center now, which is one of the best hospitals in the area. But unfortunately, they was about 20 minutes away. So instead of them taking me to Norfolk, they had to wait for Norfolk to come and get me. And during that time, that 20-minute time, I was just constantly praying, constantly just suffering. And, they finally arrived, and they loaded me into the ambulance, and, the paramedics asked me all of the questions. I'm telling them I don't know what's wrong, and just hurry up and get me. So they kind of stabilized me, but that was one of the longest 20 minutes rides of my life, because I really didn't, once again, know what's happening. So, they gave me something for the pain, which kind of subsided, but I still, I knew that my life was in danger, because, I just never felt anything like that. So we finally got to the hospital, and they took me into the emergency room. They immediately started doing things like CAT scans and MRIs on my brain and my head, and they got me to a point where I wasn't, in pain, or I wasn't feeling any discomfort from my head. And then they brought me up to the hospital room, in which, I was just happy that, that the pain had stopped, that the discomfort had stopped. And, I was in, I guess, a good stable position. And finally, at this time it's about 12 or 1 o'clock at night. Finally, this doctor, once again, I'll show you the picture, Dr. Kennedy. I will never forget him in my life. One of the best physicians, in my opinion, in the world. But I've never been operated by anybody but him. But he entered the room, and I can tell on the look, on his face, that it was something serious. So he was like, well, Mr. Taylor, I have something that's serious. He said, well, your MRIs and CAT scans came back revealing that you have two subarachnoid aneurysms. And what has happened is, you have two subarachnoid, mean they're not on top of your brain, they're inside your brain. And what has happened was one of them has burst, and that was actually the pop that I felt, and the compression in my head was just blood, filling my skull, pressing against my brain. And he said, I don't know how you have made it even to the hospital. I don't really know how you made it through the weekend, but we are going. We have three options. We have one option is, because you have two of them. One option is we can go through your leg and run a catheter up into your brain, and we can reach one of them to coil it. Which is, I guess they just wrap something around the artery to prevent blood from going out the hole, or the sac that was puffed up. He said the only problem with that is we don't know which one has busted, but we can only get to one of them. So we're taking the risk of that not being the one that's causing the problem. And so he said the next option is, of course, we have to go through your brain. And I was like, oh man, he said we have to open your head up. And I was like, oh man, that was something very, undesirable for me, because of a number of reasons. I'm gonna tell you about that. And he said the third reason was, the third thing we can do is we can just, let it be, but you probably, won't live, to the morning. And so I asked him about the surgery. I was like, okay, with this surgery, what would you have to do? He was like, well, we're gonna go in, cut you open, and coil it, stop it, and fix it and everything. And I asked, okay, well, what's the danger? She said, well, it's a 50-50 operation. You could die. You also could end up blind. You could, end up mute. Not able to hear. You could actually end up paralyzed. There's so many dangers with this, and but that's the only option we have. And I don't know if it was in my faith or even in my arrogance or whatever. I just asked him, well, what is the scar going to look like? And he looked at me, said, with a frowned up face, like, well, it won't be that bad. And the reason I asked that, once again, it may be my vanity or whatever, but I had seen so many people with large scars and disfigured heads, and I just envisioned myself as one of those people, and that was, I guess, something that I didn't, I don't want people looking at me awkward or strange whenever they see me. And he said you'll be fine, and I was like, okay, and I still don't, once again I still don't know why I asked that, but he was like, you'll be fine. So and then he left. He was like, well, we don't, they did. I think I'd already called my mother or whatever, or not. But he was like, we don't have time to waste. Like, I know your family's in North Carolina. We don't have time to waste. This is, we have to do this like immediately. So I'm gonna give you, some time, to make some calls or whatever. But we have to make this decision soon. So he left out of the room, and I'm just sitting there like, man, this is it. This is it. Like, this is, I'm not gonna make it through. Then the nurse came in with the little paper, saying that, if you are in a vegetative state, after the surgery, do you want to, stay on life support, or would you like to pull the plug? And I thought that I put, I want to remain on life support. But in hindsight, they showed me afterwards that I had chosen to pull the plug. You understand? So, once again, that was another, I guess, trick of the enemy that didn't want me to make it out of this. And, so I just started to sit there, and, once again, I called, I started to pray, but I called because it was at that point in time, I was just like, this is it. I'm trying to call everybody I love and, pretty much say my goodbyes. And mind you, by this time, it's like 5 or 6 in the morning, 5 in the morning. After they ran all the tests, after they got everything, all the results back, it's about 4 or 5 in the morning. So, of course, I called my mother and father. My father's a pastor. I told him the situation. And, we prayed. And, he prayed the prayer of faith over me. And, I told him, I loved them and everything. And they were on their way. They didn't hesitate. They packed up and, hit the road immediately. And so after after I talked to them for a while, I was like, who else can I call, man? Like, I don't want to leave without, saying goodbyes. I think I called my sister. I think, once again, because of the time frame, she didn't answer. I called, one of my brothers, Terrence Thornton. He answered, I think, and, I just, told him the situation, and once again, I almost started saying goodbyes. And then I called another childhood friend, my brother, Terry Jones. Once, you might have heard this story. I know he's heard it like 2 or 3 times. And he didn't answer on the first time, but then, a few minutes later, he called back. And he was actually at a pastor's conference. And I told him the situation. I told him everything, and he was just real quiet. And I was just telling him, look, man, I love you. Man, I'm just so proud of what you're doing with your new church, man. Keep up the good work. And, I wish the best for you and your family. And, so I guess he understood, what I was saying and where I was going with it. And then, he interrupted me. And he said, hold on, Rick, how are you going into this? And this may have changed, my whole outlook, my whole life, really. He said, how are you going into this? Which meaning, are you going into this surgery thinking that you're going to die? Or are you going into this surgery thinking that the victory has already been won, that you're going to come out of this unscathed? And that changed my whole perspective. And the Bible said, as a man thinketh, so is he, or so shall it be. And I was like, yeah, you're right. And, we prayed the prayer of faith again. And, I felt so much better when I got off the phone with him because, I realized that, yeah, God is on my side. God is not, going to let me die here. He's going to do a miraculous thing. And so after that call, I felt much better. Maybe tried to call a couple more people. Of course, considering the time, I didn't. Those are the only 3 calls I remember. Next thing you know, the doctor comes in, and he was like, "Okay, we're ready. They're going to go ahead and get you down and ready for anesthesia." And they put me on the rolling mat, the rolling gurney, and they started administering the anesthesia right then and there. So they put the thing over my face, and I got down into the surgery room, and I was laying on this table. And the only thing I remember was Dr. Kennedy taking a razor and starting to shave my head. And like after the first stroke, that's all I remember. That's all I remember. And it turned out to be a 5-hour brain surgery where they went in and, I guess they had, I don't know what it was. I don't know how they kept me alive with my brain open. But it turned out to be a 5-hour brain surgery that no doubt was successful because I'm here today. But I woke up in the hospital bed. I came to in the hospital bed to the faces of my mother and father. And I guess I was so, they had me drugged up, and I said something, and whatever I said, it was funny. And then my dad looked at me and said, "Oh yeah, he's all right. He's all right." I said something because I was so high and drugged up. I forgot what I said, but um, I came out of the surgery okay. I was, of course my head was hurting. For my family was there. My sister, my daughter was there. Her mother was there. Um, and I stayed in the hospital, you know, under observation for the first, 10 days. Um, I was, the second day, I think, I had my computer, my laptop. I told them to bring my laptop. The second day out of brain surgery, I was in the hospital doing some classwork. And the doctor walked in. He said, "Man, what are you doing, man? You gotta rest." I was like, "Man, I can't rest. I can't get behind." And then I pulled out my book and started working on my book. And 2 or 3 days later, I think 3 days later, they got me out of the bed to walk. And when I first started walking, I had to labor a little bit for my right side. I walked slowly, and they said, they got me up every day after that. The third or fourth day, they came in with like a little speech therapist. My speech was fine, um, and I just progressively got better until 10 days later, and I walked out of that hospital 10 days later with no ill effects. Um, they gave me a couple of prescriptions, and I took them, for about 10 days, very expensive prescriptions. And but when I was in the hospital, once again, I guess that was my vanity. They kept the hat on my head where the stitches were, and once again, that was my fear. And I didn't look at myself. All the while, I didn't look at my head. Anytime um, they took that picture, even when they took this picture, I never looked at my head. That's Dr. Kennedy right there. He even bought one of my books. But there's my head. There's a scar on my head right there. And I was definitely afraid because I didn't want a real grotesque scar. And so I didn't look at my head for the next 10 days. And then even a month after I got out of the hospital, I never looked at my head. I never looked at, even like, when I took a shower. And I was like, I finally, got the nerve one day to look. And I don't even know if you can see it, but, that's the scar right there. That's the scar. It goes from here to here. From here to here. And so if you look at my head, sometimes it seems a little disfigured. If you see pictures of me, you see one side of my head's up is always higher. And I guess that's from, what the work they did. And, but I was self-conscious about that, about being a big, grotesque scar. Once again, God bless me that, the scar is not even that visible. And even, some people, unless I point it out, people can't tell that there's a sort of a disfigurement in my head. But I walked out of that hospital 10 days later. Once again, Dr. Kennedy, he said, "Man, he's never seen anything like this. You're certainly blessed." I went back 30 days later, and he was like, "Man, you are completely healed. There's no problem with you, with anything." And I was, even like I said, sometimes I forget how good God has been to me, because even after the surgery, and once again, my past testimony has been about, my addictions. Even after surgery, that 10th day I got out of the surgery, I got home to North Carolina, and one of my friends came through, and we went out and did, a couple of grams of cocaine. That same night that I left the hospital after a 5-hour brain surgery, 10 days, we did cocaine, smoked cigarettes, drank beer. And, once again, I just feel like that was the devil just trying to take me out. I was in that mindset where, I don't, I don't care. I survived this, but I'm grateful, even that night that, nothing didn't rupture, nothing didn't accelerate, my heart, everything stayed fine. And, when God continues to do something like that for you, sometimes we do take things for granted. But, I've come to the part of my life that I can't forget those things. That's why I continue to do these testimonies. But I'm just grateful for God that, like even today I have no ill effects. Like this morning I ran and walked 4 miles. I lift weights. I have no inhibitions in my body from, you know, uh, 2 brain aneurysms. And, when I tell the story, people are like, what? You had 2? My aunt died from an aneurysm. And most of the time when people have aneurysms, they don't know that they have them until they dead. You understand? Like people just fall dead, and you're like, what happened? Oh, they had an aneurysm. And so, I consider myself fortunate. I thank God that He once again spared my life. He showed me grace and mercy, and He kept me from that situation. That many people don't survive, and I want to give Him all the glory and the honor and the praise and the power, because I know, without Him being there for me, I could not have made it. I could not have survived that ordeal, and even to be living today, 6 years later, without having any repercussions from that ordeal is just truly amazing. And I just want to once again, I want to thank God, and also thank those people who prayed for me and are continually praying for me. We often take life for granted. We often take health for granted until something like this comes comes to your front door. And this was something that you know just it still amazes me to this day. It still amazes everybody I tell. Like when I tell them the story, and really I don't even mention it that much, because it's so it's just it's just with the wonders of God. God's done so much for me. Sometimes I forget how great and miraculous He is. And so I just once again want to thank God for bringing me through that situation. I want to thank God for putting my life in the hands of once again this man, Dr. Kennedy. If anybody knows where he's at right now, I don't even think he works at the hospital anymore. But this was a man who took care. He took very very much pride in his profession, very diligent, and I just want to thank him. If anybody knows him, I just want to thank him. But most importantly, I want to thank God, my family, and those who have prayed for me over all of these years. And I do want to thank y'all for tuning in to this testimony. Leaving you with God, all things are possible. He's a healer. He's a deliverer. So if you ever faced with anything like this in your life, just realize that God is able to do and to bring you out. So I'm living proof. And until next Tuesday, once again, my name is Richard Taylor. And God bless you all. Thank you guys for tuning in once again.